It's not going to be often that I think there is a particular overlap between the things I want to talk about with storytelling and writing and stories in general, between that and current events. But when that happens, forgive me, I'm going to jump on it because I think people will click on the videos and I'm trying to grow. I got to play to the algorithm somewhat, right? Today, what I'm here to talk about is Wizards of the Coast is officially releasing the Black Aragorn card or something. For anyone who doesn't know, Wizards of the Coast is in charge of a failing and burning card game called Magic the Gathering, where they are desperately trying to milk their little pay piggies for every cent and dime that they can get out of them for cardboard. And sometimes not even for cardboard, because they're also really trying to get money out of the digital game arena. And frankly, the game has gone to hell. They've made horrible design decisions. I forget the actual art and the woke capture of the game, and the fact that the design team has outright said that basically, aside from Jace, they have no interest in having straight white male heroes anymore. Forget all that. The fact of the matter is that it's a dying game. They're not making as much money. They had this boom in 2019, 2020 when people started en masse buying it, and there were fads, and that was the time when the Pokemon card game got insanely popular because of middle-aged speculators. But Wizards of the Coast is not making enough money with the game. Simple as. And any reasonable person will tell you that it's simply because they've ruined the actual game. The game is no longer good. They've been catering to the Commander crowd at the cost of the core game. And I shouldn't be talking about this because it's not in line with the channel, but Commander destroyed Magic the Gathering. Okay, absolutely destroyed it. It was supposed to be a way to get value out of cards that rotated out of Standard, and Standard was supposed to be the way they made money. Now they make their money off Commander players, and everything has been falling apart ever since. Because they're marketing to these people, these kinds of whales that will have 10 decks that cost over $1,000 each, because holy crap, gotta collect the fancy stuff, gotta get the foils of all these cards that people are personally attached to. They started releasing these things called Secret Layers, which are alternate arts, and that's my understanding is the Lord of the Rings set is a secret layer, at least it was, or whatever, I don't really care. The controversy is because they turned Aragorn from Lord of the Rings into a black guy. And a lot of people right now are going, oh, it's politically motivated. And it might be, but the fact of the matter is that they like any company, are comparing themselves to their direct competitors. And the only real competitors for Magic the Gathering are Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon. And if you've played these games, if you've been in the game stores, disproportionately black people play Yu-Gi-Oh! Compared to Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering is still bigger, but if they see that demographic disparity, these people in boardrooms are going to think that there are nerds that they can capture. We're not talking about the average audience they're pulling in. They're trying to pull from their competitors. That's the entire logic of what they're trying to do. They're trying to offer something to come over because they're middle management bean counter idiots who don't understand why certain demographics would be interested in Yu-Gi-Oh! Instead of Magic the Gathering, and they think they've been convinced that it's representation. And it's not, but that's what they're doing. I don't think it's political at all. They're literally just trying to salvage the burning train wreck that is their collapsing marketability right now because no one wants to play their terrible game. Now, you should just be ignoring it. I stopped playing the game. I used to play Arena, but only they didn't get money out of me because it was just free to play and it was something to occupy some time in the day. There's that mental engagement because the game used to be really good. I stopped playing paper, halfway through the COVID pandemic, whatever. I was a modern player, and that's the third most expensive way to play the game, arguably. And they did some stuff with Modern Horizons that I shouldn't talk about here. Suffice to say, though, that the actual mechanics of the game got destroyed and it stopped being fun. Now, how does this tie in to what this channel is supposed to be about? That's because I want to talk about authorial intent. When a author, such as myself, or such as J.R.R. Tolkien, writes a story, they make a ton of choices, very specific choices. And sometimes they're careless choices, sometimes they're incidental. And then they have it the way they have it. And no one really questions that. It's when it gets handed over to movie studios, to video game companies, to comic stores, or when it gets handed over to literally anyone else than the author. As soon as that happens, that person is not really interested in the vision of the author. They're interested in making money off of it. And sometimes there's legitimate constraints, like, maybe you're a mid-budget movie trying to adapt just a reasonably good book, and you look at your cast of actors who showed up interested in the role, and you probably can't say, oh, we're only going to look at people who specifically look exactly the way this character was described. Your movie will be better if you compromise on the appearance in favor of the actual acting skills. And that's allegedly what used to happen quite a bit. But that's clearly not what's happening here, okay? This is an illustration that Wizards of the Coast is making to try and gather this hype. And the controversy is arguably the point because it gets people talking about it, but I urge everyone to always talk about it in the context of they're doing it because their game is dying, because they ruined the game already. This is not the cause of Magic the Gathering going to crap. This is a symptom. They think that they can grow their player base by doing this, or at least by causing the controversy. We used to be in an era of journalist clickbait, and now we're just in generalized social media and YouTube clickbait, which hopefully benefits me. But author intent is supposed to be safeguarded by the author. They can obviously be paid enough money to not care. That happens all the time. Things get muddy when you start talking about estate management. J.R.R. Tolkien obviously passed away, and unfortunately so did his son Christopher Tolkien. Christopher Tolkien was in charge of the estate during the Peter Jackson trilogy, and I believe, also during the Hobbit trilogy. That shouldn't have really been. But Christopher Tolkien was very close with his father, worked directly on his manuscripts, on the translations, and everything about it. It was part of his life and his family's legacy, and he was fully on board with his father's vision, which was to expand on the Anglo-Saxon mythology to enrich their own culture. That's why Aragorn, and basically every character in Lord of the Rings, is not just white. It's wrong to say that Aragorn is white. Aragorn's Anglo-Saxon. They're basically all Anglo-Saxon because it's for that specific culture. J.R.R. Tolkien did not live in America. He did not live in the colonies. He lived in a specific area of the world with a long ethnic background and their own culture, with their own influences and expansions and interactions and all that. But we're talking about specifically a guy who worked as a professor translating Middle English, and that was his life. And he wrote a few books drawing on all of that, on all that passion, all that knowledge, all that expertise in linguistics, and you name it. And that's what he wanted to do. And we all know that was his intent. Everyone speaking in good faith knows that was the intent. Similarly, we also know things like Hermione Granger in Harry Potter is not black. Most of those characters probably were not gay, even if Rowling wants to go back after the fact and tweet about, oh, see, that was secretly the intent, or whatever nonsense. The only people with the say about whether the adaptation can go forward depends on the contract, depends on the licensing, but it's the inheritors of the estate. And the estate is supposed to safeguard the integrity of the IP. And this does happen successfully, believe it or not, with the Sherlock Holmes IP. The Conan Doyle estate is very, very picky about the portrayals of Sherlock Holmes. There's obviously some divergence in interpretation and acting, all that, but they don't allow things to happen that harm the Sherlock Holmes IP because they know they need to be able to keep selling it. This caused a bunch of controversy a couple weeks ago, or months ago, with the Roald Dahl censorship thing that happened, where sensitivity readers got in and started taking out every single emotionally loaded description and said, oh, that's a problem, 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 that's a problem. And that caused a huge blow up about why listen to sensitivity readers. And that's a video for another day. I think the short version I want to say on sensitivity readers are, if they call themselves a sensitivity reader, they're not qualified to do the job. If they are qualified to fix your representation issues, they would properly be labeled a subject matter expert. And the distinction there is worth its own video entirely. Let me bring this back to authorial intent. The Tolkien estate is no longer in the hands of J.R. Tolkien. It's no longer in the hands of Christopher Tolkien. The reason Rings of Power got greenlit, and the reason Amazon just ran roughshod with what little tiny bits of IP speculation that they were able to license, is, I think, frankly, because the people in charge of the estate are more interested in the money now. They don't have that direct connection to the author, which I think means that it falls on the hands of the audience to say, no, you can't just permute this into 1,000 variations of whatever crap your half-baked writers think is better. You can't call it this original thing, because we know what it is. We still have the original Lord of the Rings books, and we know what they are, and we can see that you aren't producing that. You can't call it Lord of the Rings. You are lying to us. And which is, of course, a different thing from, can you write a story with a black king who comes back out of exile to lead his nation to prosperity? Nobody is saying you can't write that. They're just saying, that's not Lord of the Rings. We know Lord of the Rings. You are lying to us. And I think it is the duty of the consumer, of the fan at that point, to say, I will not accept this. You will not get money. For all your production costs, I am going to do my best to make sure you lose money, and you, a company, are going to be financially penalized for doing this to us. Because it's lying. Whenever possible, I encourage authors to hold on to their IP, to have clauses in their contracts that automatically revert it back to protect the integrity. Because if these stories get watered down and changed and overwritten and recontextualized, they get destroyed. And it's just really unfortunate how little money there is in like actual grassroots writing, publishing, marketing, and books and everything, where a movie studio, just by nature of how much more money is involved in films and theaters, and the ability to reach bigger audiences in like China and so on, they can just slap a stack of cash down in front of an author. And that author, not speaking of the Tolkien estate per se, but like a mid-list author, they can't afford to say no. So think of this, dear listener, as a call to support the writers that you enjoy. I obviously want you to support me. This is my channel. I write. I'm doing all this stuff. But this is a generalized claim. The fans need to be the line of protection for the author, to support the author, and to punish these disgusting, slimy marketing tactics that are going on. And also try not to just fall into rage bait algorithm feeding. I hope that what I've done with this video has been to give more context, more things to think about, more value for the discussion than if this showed up, you've probably seen a dozen other videos from other people going, "Oh my God, look how racist Wizards of the Coast is. They're disrespecting Tolkien. Don't you hate that they are ruining this thing you love?" Because that's, in my opinion, that's just a symbiotic back scratching between the company that needs marketing and the people who get paid to market by shuffling hatred around. It's obviously not good that Wizards of the Coast did this. I'm more disturbed by the fact that it's so effective at bringing people's attention back to a terrible dying game. But that's the nature of the internet right now. Now, as I close this off, I do want to devil's advocate. Sometimes you do need to tokenize a character. You need to do that to break open an archetype. And I'm actually going to use Superman as an example. There's probably a dozen variations of Black Superman that I can't name because I'm not a big comic guy. But you want to reuse an IP for slightly new stories so that you get people to give it a try. And that's just another issue with consumers, is they're very risk averse. I believe because so much out there has burned them historically. At least that's my personal opinion. I can't tell you how many times I've tried something new and gone, "Oh, that was terrible." I do my best to go into every book, every anime, every film, every TV show going, "This could probably be good." And I cannot tell you the amount of times where it's just been garbage. And it really makes it hard for me to want to go try new things. I am, like other people, just more interested in something I'm vaguely familiar with, like the Dungeons and Dragons movie. There is this idea, such as that if they're playing with such a big IP, that because there are supposed to be these built-in checks and balances, that surely they're not going to screw it up. The Marvel movies are supposed to be making $1 billion each. Surely they're going to hire good writers, and they're going to give their CGI teams enough time to make the film correct. Everyone was on board with that when they were doing that in phase 1, 2, and 3. And then they somehow screwed it up. Everyone went into Star Wars expecting the best because it's Star Wars. How do you screw it up? They found a way. That just really hurts trust, and it punishes people for trying to be optimistic. So how do you start new stories? Well, you don't want to end up where one character is such a huge archetype that everyone gets compared to him. It's actually... let's take the detective genre. It is actually incorrect at this point to compare everyone to Sherlock Holmes. You can say that Sherlock Holmes was the pivot point of the genre's development, but there are so many variations and iterations and evolutions and genre tweaks and tone tweaks that have come after that you would be a fool to compare every detective to Sherlock Holmes. Historically influential, not like what you have today. But that came evolutionarily, and it does come from take what works, tweak it a bit more, tweak it a bit more, tweak it a bit more. And you don't want to run the risk of being so similar to something with your original idea that you just get compared to the original, and because you're not the original, you get unfairly labeled as trash. That's kind of an issue with the review scene, with the critic scene, of people need to talk about new ideas in the context of what they already know. And unfortunately, there really isn't a good solution to that. Unless you're talking to someone with an insane breadth of experience, such as what should be a professional critic. If you're just talking around the water cooler, let's pretend that people still go into the office. If you do, I'm sorry. The average person has to discuss things in terms of what they already know. Any amateur aspiring author will tell you that at some point they've pitched their great idea to somebody, and that person in full support has gone, "Oh, that's just like Batman, except not a superhero." And it may actually be nothing like Batman, but they don't have the context to tease apart what the differences are because they're not a super fan. They're just going off of what they know. And that can really create a sticky situation of people needing to glom on to existing IP, but just tweak it to do what they're trying to do. So in a perfect world, people need to be more open to what's going on. They need practice, and they need a guiding hand from experienced critics so they can discuss why things are enjoyable and why they're not, and what is good about these new things. And when companies are just shamelessly slamming in their political slant, they need to be punished for that. They need to be monetarily punished, and people need to know that that's intentionally what they're doing. So don't buy this Magic the Gathering set, and think about that the next time you see an old IP getting passed around Hollywood, like certain things I shouldn't mention on YouTube. Gonna call it here. This is an unexpected recording because hopefully this gets me some more subscribers. Drop the subscribe, hit the like button, and leave me a comment saying, yeah, what was the last movie that really disappointed you? How about that? That's an easy one to answer. Cheers.